The fluorescent lights above me buzzed with a cold, electric hum as I blinked awake, my cheek pressed against a stiff institutional pillow and the sharp scent of antiseptic filling my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't even remember my own name, only the crushing weight of a fear I couldn't place yet. If you've ever opened your eyes and felt the world tilt beneath you, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from, because moments like this are more real than most people want to believe. As my vision sharpened, I saw the blank hospital walls, the wristband digging into my skin, and the distant echo of footsteps that didn't sound welcoming. A single thought hit me harder than the panic someone wanted me here, and not for my safety. Let me show you how it all began. I woke to the sharp bite of fluorescent light cutting through my eyelids, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or drowning. My body felt stiff, weighted, like I'd been dropped into a world that didn't belong to me. The sheets were rough, the air smelled like bleach, and somewhere down the hall I could hear the muted shuffle of footsteps. It took only a few seconds for the truth to sink in, but those seconds stretched long enough for panic to claw its way up my spine. I wasn't in my home. I wasn't anywhere familiar. I was inside a psychiatric facility, and I had no memory of how I got there. When I tried to sit up, my head pulsed with a dull ache, the kind that comes from crying too hard or being pushed too far, and then it hit me. My son, Michael. The last clear memory I had was his face hovering too close, his tone strangely calm, almost rehearsed. I remember thinking something felt off, but I brushed it aside. I never imagined he would go this far. I never imagined he would sign papers to have me committed. The betrayal settled in slowly, like cold water filling a room. Confusion twisted into fear, and fear twisted into something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name yet. All I knew was that nothing about this was an accident. Someone wanted me silent, tucked away, unable to question anything. Before I could even steady my breath, a single thought surfaced. How did my life drift into this nightmare? Before everything unraveled, my life in Spokane felt simple and steady, the kind of rhythm you don't notice until it's gone. I filled my mornings with slow walks around the neighborhood, tending to my little garden, and letting the quiet hours of the day keep me company. I always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially family. That trust used to feel like a strength. Now, looking back, I see how it left cracks wide enough for trouble to slip through. I remember the first time I noticed money missing. It wasn't dramatic, just a small gap that didn't match my notes. Around 1,000 wasn't something I would misplace, but I told myself I must have forgotten something. Around that same time, my son Ryan suddenly became attentive in a way he never had been before. He started showing up more often, hovering over my mail, asking about my bills, insisting he could help me stay organized. At first, it felt sweet. Then it started feeling watchful. His girlfriend, Madison, also began stopping by with plates of baked goods. I wanted to believe she was trying to be kind, but I kept noticing this odd metallic taste in everything she brought. I brushed it off as a new recipe gone wrong, but a part of me felt uneasy each time I saw her walking up my driveway with another covered dish. These were small things, and I tried to explain them away. After all, they were my family, people I loved, people I trusted. Still, something inside me started tightening, like a quiet warning I wasn't ready to hear. Standing in that facility room later, replaying these moments, I realized the signs had been there long before the truth finally cornered me. When I finally managed to steady myself enough to stand, the room felt even smaller than before. The walls were a washed-out gray, padded in certain places, as if someone expected me to lose control. Every sound seemed sharper. The click of shoes outside my door, the distant rustling of papers, the soft hum of the overhead lights. I tried to speak to one of the nurses when she passed, but the way she looked at me made my stomach twist. It was a look reserved for someone fragile, unpredictable, already judged before a word could be spoken. It was as if she had read a script about me, one I had never seen. My belongings were gone. No purse, no phone, nothing familiar. I felt stripped down to nothing, like my identity had been quietly taken from me. And then the memories started drifting back in pieces, sitting at my kitchen table the night before, picking at a slice of banana bread Madison had dropped off, noticing that same metallic taste on my tongue. I remember feeling unusually tired, heavier than I should have been for such an ordinary day. I remember Ryan insisting I rest, guiding me toward the couch with a gentleness that now feels rehearsed. Inside that sterile room, those fragments snapped together with terrifying clarity. The exhaustion, the taste, the way Ryan had kept hovering close. None of it felt random anymore. I wasn't here because I lost control. I was here because someone wanted me out of the way. Fear settled first, cold and paralyzing, but beneath it, something else started to rise, a tight, simmering anger I hadn't felt in years. Whatever this was, whatever they had planned, I knew this was only the beginning, and I wasn't done fighting. For a while, I just sat there, letting the weight of everything press against my chest. The fear was still there, sharp and insistent, but it stopped being the only thing I could feel. Underneath it, something steadier surfaced. Something that had carried me through years of classrooms, crises, and challenges I never asked for. I told myself to breathe slowly, to collect my thoughts, to take back even an inch of control. Once I steadied my mind, I started paying attention. The staff walked around me with the same overly gentle caution, as if they had been briefed to expect instability. Every time I asked about my belongings or tried to request my phone, I watched their expressions tighten. It wasn't malice, it was training. Someone had painted a picture of me, and they were reacting to that version instead of the woman sitting in front of them. That realization sparked something familiar, an old instinct from my teaching days. I used to sense when a student wasn't telling the full truth, when a story had been rehearsed. I felt that same awareness now, but sharper. My voice, even without being raised, carried authority again. My thoughts aligned. My fear stopped running wild. I understood then that getting out wouldn't be about force. It would be about precision, about letting them underestimate me while I quietly gathered every detail I needed. I began forming the outline of a plan, get access to a phone, reach someone outside this circle, and trace exactly what Ryan had set in motion. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I was done being passive. Whatever came next, I would meet it head on. When Thomas Reed finally reached me, it felt like a lifeline being thrown into deep water. I remember standing there in that cold hallway, my mind fraying at the edges. When I heard he was on his way, I had managed to get word to him through a staff member who seemed less convinced by the description written about me. And the moment I knew he was coming, something inside me loosened. When he arrived, the shift was immediate. For the first time since waking up in that place, I felt seen. I felt believed. And the relief of that nearly brought me to my knees. But it didn't last long. Once he secured my discharge, he walked me through everything he had uncovered in a matter of hours. The guardianship paperwork had been filed the day before I woke up in the facility. Not that morning, not in a panic. The day before? That meant this wasn't a rash, emotional decision. It was preparation. It was intention. It was my son planning a future where I had no say in my own life. Then came the next blow. My belongings were already being sold, listings posted, bank accounts flagged, financial control shifting out of my hands faster than I could process. Hearing that broke something in me I didn't know could break. I kept thinking about all the years I spent raising him, the scraped knees, the birthday mornings, the quiet talks after school. To know he had this in him, to know he could look at me and see opportunity instead of family, left a hollow ache I'll never forget. By the time Thomas walked me out of that facility, my relief had hardened into something sharper. I was going home, but I wasn't walking back into the life I'd left. I was walking toward whatever truth waited for me there, no matter how painful it would be. When I pulled into my driveway, the first thing I saw was the for sale sign staked straight into my front lawn. It felt like a punch to the chest. My house, my little corner of safety, my history, had been reduced to a listing. I remember sitting there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as if the car was the only familiar thing I had left, but nothing could have prepared me for what waited inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the air felt hollow. Rooms that once held warmth and color had been stripped bare. Furniture was missing, shelves were emptied, drawers hung open like someone had torn through them without care. Even the walls looked different, as if the lack of my belongings had changed their shape. I walked from room to room, feeling grief rise in waves. My memories weren't just misplaced, they were dismantled. The worst moments came in pieces. My mother's quilt was gone. The grandfather clock my father restored had vanished. Boxes of old letters, ones I kept tucked high in a closet, had been dragged out and tossed aside, some left open, others missing entirely. It felt like someone had peeled back the layers of my life and sorted them into valuable and disposable. And then the deeper truth revealed itself. Unfamiliar locks on the office door, papers on the desk with signatures that weren't mine, medical forms filled with fabricated symptoms, bank statements showing withdrawals I never made. It wasn't sloppy, it was systematic. Months of preparation, months of reshaping my identity on paper so the world would believe I was losing myself. Standing in the ruins of my own home, I felt shock give way to a deeper, steadier anger. Whoever orchestrated this wanted me erased from my own life, but I wasn't disappearing. Not now, not ever. I knew exactly what I had to do next. It was time to find answers, and I wouldn't be searching alone. Reaching out for help felt strangely vulnerable, even after everything I had already endured. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, what was left of it, feeling the weight of the stripped rooms around me, and realizing I couldn't face this alone. That was the moment I reached out to Detective Ava Ramirez. I didn't know what to expect, but when she listened, truly listened, it was the first real sense of steadiness I'd felt since this ordeal began. She didn't treat me like a confused woman in over her head. She treated me like someone whose story held weight. That recognition mattered more than I could ever explain. Soon after, Attorney Mark Ellison joined us, bringing a calm, methodical presence I didn't know I needed. He approached my situation like a puzzle that could be solved, not a tragedy spiraling out of control. With the two of them beside me, I finally felt the ground steady beneath my feet again, and that was when the real investigation began. The first blow was seeing the forged medical reports, page after page describing symptoms I never had, evaluations I never attended, and signatures that looked just enough like mine to pass at a glance. Each line felt like a fresh violation. Then came the bank statements. Transfers made in the early hours of the morning, some as high as $18,000, all funneled into accounts I didn't recognize. Seeing those numbers drained from my savings made my stomach twist. But the deepest shock came from what Ava uncovered next. My case wasn't the first, not even close. There were other families, mostly older individuals with modest homes, predictable routines, and children or caregivers who had everything to gain from their disappearance. The same doctor appeared in several reports. The same attorney's name surfaced in guardianship filings, even some of the same real estate agents. It wasn't incompetence, it was choreography. As we pieced together timelines, it became painfully clear Ryan and Madison hadn't stumbled into this. They had been guided, encouraged, shown exactly how to isolate me, how to paint me as unstable, how to move quickly before anyone questioned the narrative. Realizing that nearly buckled me. The emotional pain of knowing my own son had taken those steps willingly is something I still can't fully articulate. But with every discovery, my determination sharpened. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for the truth, for every person who'd been pushed aside and silenced. And now, with Ava and Mark behind me, we were preparing for the moment everything would turn. A meeting the conspirators believed would finalize their control. A meeting where I would walk in, appearing defeated. But this time, I would be ready. Preparing for that meeting felt like bracing myself to walk into a fire I had already been burned by once. The morning of it, I woke before the sun even rose, lying still in the quiet of my half-empty house, feeling every ounce of weight pressing against me. I kept reminding myself that this time, I wasn't walking in blindly. I knew exactly what they wanted from me, exactly what they believed I would do, and exactly how they planned to finish what they had started. That knowledge didn't erase the fear pulsing under my ribs, but it gave me something stronger to hold on to. Purpose. I spent that morning rehearsing the role I had to play, whispering it into the stillness of my kitchen. A confused woman, a tired woman, a woman who was ready to sign whatever was put in front of her. I reminded myself to soften my posture, slow my responses, let their expectations paint over who I truly was. It was strange, preparing to make myself smaller when everything inside me was fighting to reclaim space. Ava and Mark had given me the structure of the plan, but it was the quiet moments between their words that stuck with me, the certainty in their eyes, the trust they placed in my strength. I carried that with me more than anything else as I got ready. I packed only what I needed, left everything else behind, and stepped out into the cold air with a steadiness I didn't fully feel yet. The drive over felt unreal. Every passing street sign seemed sharper, every sound louder. I kept glancing in the mirror, not out of vanity, but out of disbelief that I had made it this far. My hands trembled more than once, but each time I tightened my grip on the wheel and reminded myself why I was doing this. Not just for justice, not just to expose the people who tried to erase me. I was doing it to reclaim the life they thought they could quietly absorb into their own. When I pulled into the parking lot of the office building, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The building looked ordinary, almost disappointingly plain, but I knew better. This was the place they had chosen to finalize my disappearance. This was where they expected me to surrender. Inside, the air felt heavy, too warm, too still. I slipped into my practiced role immediately, eyes down, movement slow, a quiet hesitance they would interpret as vulnerability. I could sense them watching me, assessing me, preparing the paperwork as if they were arranging flowers on a table. Polite smiles, artificial calm, a performance matched only by my own. I took my seat at the table and felt the moment tighten, like a string pulled just before it snaps. My pulse roared in my ears as I lowered my gaze, pretending not to notice the way they nudged documents closer to me. I knew what was coming next, and I knew they had no idea what was waiting for them. I sat at the table with my hands resting lightly in my lap, keeping my shoulders rounded and my gaze low, just as I had practiced. The room felt unnaturally quiet, as if everyone inside was holding their breath, waiting for me to play the part they had written for me. I could feel their eyes on me, studying my expressions, looking for any sign that I might hesitate. They wanted a woman who was worn down, confused, grateful for guidance. They had no idea how sharply awake I was. The document slid toward me, inch by inch, guided by hands that pretended to tremble with concern. I didn't look at the words. I didn't need to. I already knew what they said: the end of my autonomy, the transfer of everything I had built, everything I had saved, handed over under the guise of protection. My heartbeat hammered in my chest, each thud reminding me how close I had come to losing everything without ever understanding why. As they leaned in, encouraging, patient, rehearsed, I counted the seconds in my mind. Ava had told me to expect the team to move quickly once the signal was given. I just had to keep the act steady until the moment arrived. My breathing stayed shallow, my responses soft and uncertain, while inside I felt like a storm tightening against its own sky. Then it happened. A sudden shift in the air, a burst of movement at the doorway, and the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to anyone in that room. Law enforcement swept in with a force that broke the stillness like glass shattering. Papers flew, chairs scraped, and the faces around me transformed from controlled confidence to raw panic. But nothing hit me harder than the look on my son's face. Ryan froze, his eyes wide, his mouth tightening in a way I had never seen. For a second, the world narrowed to just the two of us, mother and son. The space between us filled with everything he had done and everything I could no longer unsee. I felt grief rise first, thick and heavy, followed by something sharper, a clean cut of final understanding. He had been willing to erase me, to rewrite my life without me in it. The room erupted around us, orders shouted, hands restrained, files seized, but I stood still, letting the moment wash over me. A part of me broke open, another part hardened, and somewhere deep inside, something finally let go. By the time the noise settled and the sirens echoed faintly from outside, I felt a strange, trembling clarity. My life would never return to what it was before this. The damage was real, and the losses were permanent. But I was still standing, and now came the reckoning. When the door finally closed behind the officers and the last echo drifted away, I felt my body sag in a way I hadn't allowed it to for weeks. The adrenaline that carried me through every decision washed out of my system, leaving a strange emptiness in its place. I remember standing there, breathing slowly, trying to understand that it was over. Not the pain, not the mess, but the immediate danger. That part, at least, had ended. The days that followed moved like thick syrup. Investigators sorted through documents, seized accounts, and pieced together the timeline I could barely face. My son and the people who helped him were held accountable, but the process felt less like victory and more like mourning. I reclaimed my home one room at a time, picking up pieces of a life that had been handled like inventory. Some things were gone forever. Some parts of me were too. What surprised me was how quietly strength returns. It doesn't come as a roar. It lands like a whisper that gradually grows roots. I realized I had survived something carefully designed to erase me, and somehow that truth steadied me more than it shattered me. I learned that trust needs boundaries. Aging doesn't make us invisible. Vulnerability does not mean helplessness. And the moment you feel something is wrong, you owe yourself the courage to question it. I still grieve the boy I raised, the one I thought would protect me in my later years. But I also honor the woman I became, the one who refused to disappear. I rebuilt my routines, reclaimed my voice, and reminded myself that my life is still mine to shape. If you're listening to this and carrying your own story, your own warning signs, your own scars, I hope you'll share them. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. There's a quiet kind of peace that has settled over my days now, the kind that comes only after surviving something you never imagined you'd face. I carry the scars, but I also carry a strength I didn't know was still mine. Moving forward, I hold tight to one lesson above all: you can rebuild a life, even after someone tries to take it from you. You can reclaim your worth, your voice, and your future, no matter how shaken you feel in the beginning. I remind myself each morning that I am still here, still moving, still choosing what comes next. And if my story helps even one person feel less alone or more prepared, then sharing it has been worth every vulnerable moment. If you've lived through something that changed you, or if this brought up memories of your own, I hope you'll share them in the comments. I'm listening.